The blue bow was almost as tall as my brother. "Go on, Ethan," my dad shouted, grinning as he tossed him a key fob. "She's all yours." Everyone on the driveway burst into applause. My brother's mouth fell open. "No way, Dad, you're serious." "Happy birthday, son." The luxury SUV gleamed in the afternoon sun, its paint so polished it reflected every smiling face gathered around it. A few cousins pulled out their phones. My aunt clapped so hard her bracelets rattled. Then my mom turned toward me. "Oh, and this is for you, Nellie." She handed me a tiny paper gift bag that looked like it had come from the clearance shelf at a grocery store. I smiled politely and reached inside. A plain ceramic coffee mug. A faded little tag still hung from the handle. $5. My father laughed loud enough for everyone to hear. "Come on, sweetheart, you never cared about expensive things anyway. Ethan actually needs a vehicle." A few relatives chuckled. Nobody said a word for me. I looked from the mug to the SUV, back to my parents. For 29 years I'd convinced myself there was always a reason. This time there wasn't. I set the mug back inside the bag, picked up my purse, walked to the driver's door of the SUV and climbed inside without saying a single word. Nobody stopped me. Not until an hour later. My phone lit up. 3 missed calls. Then a text from my father. "Bring the SUV back or we're reporting it stolen." I tightened my grip on the steering wheel. Stolen. I was the one driving it. The birthday party had been planned for weeks. My brother Ethan and I had birthdays only 3 days apart, so my parents had always celebrated us together. They called it practical. Looking back, practical always seemed to mean Ethan got the spotlight while I got whatever was left. This year I'd barely made it to the party. I'd spent the morning helping a client finish an emergency accounting report before driving across town with a homemade cake balanced on my passenger seat because Mom had forgotten to order one. No one thanked me for bringing dessert. They simply carried it inside and asked me to help set up folding chairs while Ethan sat in the backyard drinking beer with our cousins. That wasn't unusual. Whenever something needed doing, people instinctively looked at me. "Nellie will handle it. Nellie's responsible. Nellie doesn't mind." Somehow those words had become my role in the family. The reliable daughter. The dependable sister. The one who never complained. Even when I watched my parents pour money into rescuing Ethan from another failed business idea. Even when I quietly paid for Mom's prescription after Dad said money was tight. Even when I drove Dad to his medical appointments because Ethan was too busy. I always believed that eventually they'd notice. That one day patience would matter. Standing in that driveway with a $5 mug in my hand, while everyone celebrated a $72,000 SUV, proved how wrong I'd been. The next vibration from my phone snapped me back to the present. Dad was calling again. I ignored it. Another call. Ignored. Then another text. "Answer your phone immediately." Instead, I pulled into a quiet overlook just outside town. The engine idled. For the first time since leaving, I looked around the inside of the SUV. Everything still smelled brand new. The plastic protective covers were still on parts of the seats. Almost without thinking, I opened the glove compartment. Inside sat a registration envelope. Curious, I unfolded the paperwork. My eyes stopped on the first line. Registered owner. Nellie Carter. I blinked. Then read it again. The same name. My name. Why would my parents threaten to report the SUV stolen, if every official document said it legally belonged to me? I stayed parked at the overlook long after the sun had started to dip behind the trees. The registration rested on my lap. I pulled out the insurance card next. Nellie Carter. I checked the temporary title paperwork folded underneath. Nellie Carter. Every single document carried my name. Not Ethan's. Not my parents'. Mine. This doesn't make any sense, I whispered. My phone rang again. Dad. I finally answered. What? I said quietly. His voice exploded through the speaker. Where are you? I don't think that's the first question you should be asking. I asked where you are. And I have a question too. Silence. I held up the registration, even though he couldn't see it. Why is my name on every document for the SUV? Another pause. Long enough to notice. Then he answered without answering. Just bring the vehicle back. Dad. I said bring it back. If it's Ethan's SUV, why am I the registered owner? His breathing grew heavier. Don't start making this complicated. I'm not making it complicated, I'm reading what's written. You know exactly what we meant. No, I replied, actually I don't. His tone turned sharp. You've embarrassed this family enough tonight, come home. I stared through the windshield. For years that sentence would have worked. Come home. Fix it. Keep the peace. Apologize first. Ask questions later. But something inside me had finally stopped bending. I'm not coming back tonight. Before he could respond, I ended the call. For several seconds, I simply sat there listening to my own heartbeat. It felt strange. Not guilty. Just quiet. As I drove toward my apartment, memories kept surfacing one after another. When Ethan dropped out of college, Dad called it finding himself. When I earned my accounting certification after years of night classes, Dad smiled and said, well, that's practical. When Ethan crashed his second car, my parents helped him replace it within weeks. When mine needed a new transmission, Dad told me, you're good with money, you'll figure something out. I'd worked weekends for 6 months to pay the repair bill. Nobody had even asked if I needed help. By the time I reached my apartment complex, I realized something painful. The SUV wasn't the first unfair thing. It was simply the first one I refused to ignore. I parked beneath the security lights and shut off the engine. My phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't Dad. It was a notification from Facebook. My mother had uploaded an entire birthday album. The first photo showed Ethan standing beside the SUV, both hands on the hood, smiling like he'd won the lottery. The caption read, our son's dream finally came true, we couldn't be prouder. Happy birthday, Ethan. There wasn't a single picture of me. Not one. The comments poured in. Congratulations, Ethan. Your parents are amazing. You deserve it. What an incredible gift. I kept scrolling. More photos. The driveway. The bow. My parents hugging Ethan. Even the birthday cake I'd brought was there. But every image had been carefully cropped, so I wasn't visible. It was as if I'd never attended my own birthday celebration. I let out a slow breath and locked my phone. For the first time, I wasn't angry. I was beginning to understand exactly where I stood. A new notification appeared before I could put the phone away. It wasn't from family. It wasn't from a friend. It was a private message from someone whose name I recognized immediately. Michael Sanders, sales consultant, Horizon Luxury Motors. The dealership where my parents had bought the SUV. The message was only one sentence long. Nellie, I think you should know what really happened. I barely slept. Michael's message stayed open on my phone for almost an hour before I finally replied. Can we meet? His answer came within minutes. Tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock, at the dealership, ask for me. The showroom looked completely different in daylight than it had in the birthday photos. Families wandered between polished vehicles while salespeople chatted over coffee. Michael spotted me almost immediately. Nellie. I nodded. Thanks for coming. He glanced around the showroom before lowering his voice. Would you mind stepping into my office? The moment the door closed, he looked uneasy. I've been debating whether I should contact you. Why? Because something didn't sit right with me yesterday. I folded my arms. What happened? He opened a folder from his desk. Your father handled most of the purchase. I know. He specifically requested that the financing and ownership be placed in your name. I stared at him. He said you had already agreed. I never agreed to anything. Michael sighed. That's what I was afraid you'd say. He slid a copy of the purchase worksheet across the desk. Your credit score qualified for a much better interest rate than anyone else's application connected to the purchase. I looked down at the paperwork. My name appeared over and over again. Borrower, registered owner, primary insured. Everything pointed back to me. My brother, I asked. Michael hesitated. He submitted an application. And it wasn't approved. I felt the room grow strangely quiet. So my father knew Ethan couldn't qualify. Yes. And he used my credit instead. Michael nodded slowly. He told us you understood the arrangement. I didn't even know there was an arrangement. I'm sorry. He genuinely looked sorry. I thought about calling you yesterday, but I wasn't sure whether it was my place. You did the right thing. For the first time since leaving the party, pieces began fitting together. The SUV had never really been Ethan's. My parents had simply expected me to hand it over after the celebration. Without questions. Without hesitation. Because that's what I'd always done. By lunchtime, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Text after text arrived from relatives. Why are you punishing your brother? Your parents sacrificed so much for both of you. Give Ethan his SUV back. Someone had clearly been talking. Then my cousin Ashley called. Nellie, what is going on? I honestly wish I knew. Aunt Diane said you drove off with Ethan's birthday present. I closed my eyes. So that's the story now. Isn't it true? No. Then what happened? I'll explain when I actually know everything myself. That evening, my parents asked everyone to come back to the house for what Dad called a family conversation. The moment I walked in, every pair of eyes turned toward me. Richard stood in the center of the living room. There she is. His voice was calm. Too calm. I'd like everyone to hear this. I remained near the doorway. Dad pointed directly at me. Your sister decided to ruin your birthday, Ethan. Ethan crossed his arms. Nellie, seriously. I haven't ruined anything. Dad cut me off. You took your brother's vehicle. I drove away in the vehicle that I was handed the keys to. You knew exactly what it meant. No, Dad, apparently I didn't. Several relatives shifted uncomfortably. Dad held out his hand. Give Ethan the keys. Ethan stepped forward. Come on, Nell, this has gone far enough. Instead of arguing, I reached into my purse. Not for the keys. For the registration. I unfolded the document and placed it on the coffee table. Then the insurance card. Then the temporary title paperwork. Before anyone says another word, I said calmly, could someone please read the owner's name out loud? Silence filled the room. My uncle picked up the registration first. His eyes narrowed. He looked at me. Then at Dad. Then back at the paper. It says, He stopped. My aunt leaned closer. It says Nellie Carter. A ripple moved through the room. What? That can't be right. Richard stepped forward so quickly the coffee table shook. It's just paperwork, he snapped. The dealership made a temporary mistake. No one answered, because everyone had just seen the same thing. The certainty in the room had vanished. For the first time, people weren't looking at me. They were looking at my father. Just then my phone vibrated. I glanced at the screen. A voicemail notification. From the bank financing the SUV. The preview read, "Ms. Carter, we're calling to verify information regarding the vehicle loan signed under your name." The voicemail played 3 times before I fully understood what I was hearing. "Ms. Carter, this is Melissa from First State Auto Finance. We're calling to verify information regarding the vehicle loan issued under your name. Please contact us as soon as possible." I lowered the phones. The room was still silent after everyone had read the registration, but the voicemail changed everything. I looked at my father. "You said this was just paperwork." He folded his arms. "It is." "Then why is the bank calling me?" His jaw tightened. "We'll deal with that later." "No," I said, "we'll deal with it now." Without waiting for another answer, I turned and walked out of the house. This time no one tried to stop me. The next morning, I sat across from a loan officer at First State Auto Finance. "My name is Karen Ellis," she said, extending her hand. "You requested copies of your financing documents." "I did." She placed a thick file on the desk. "I'll need to verify your identification before releasing everything." After checking my driver's license, she slid the folder toward me. "These are the complete loan records." I opened the files. Every page seemed to make my stomach sink a little farther. Loan agreement. Insurance authorization. Registration request. Financing approval. Page after page carried my legal name. I looked up. "I'm responsible for all of this." Karen nodded. "Legally, yes." "The entire loan?" "Yes." "The monthly payments?" "Yes." "The insurance?" "Yes." "If nobody makes the payments?" It affects your credit." I swallowed hard. "So if someone stopped paying, you would be financially responsible?" For a moment I couldn't even speak. This wasn't about a birthday anymore. It wasn't even about favoritism. I had been made responsible for a $72,000 obligation without ever being told the truth. "There are a few things you should understand," Karen continued. She pointed to several signatures in the file. "Most of the paperwork was completed during appointments attended by your father." "My father?" "Yes." "He handled nearly every step leading up to final delivery." I stared at the documents. "He told everyone I already knew." Karen chose her words carefully. "I can't speak to private family conversations. But these documents make one thing very clear." She tapped the borrower section. "You are the person legally obligated under this agreement." There was no confusion. No misunderstanding. Everything had been built around me. Before leaving the bank, Karen handed me a business card. "I can't give legal advice," she said, "but considering everything you've shown me, I strongly recommend speaking with an attorney before making any decisions." I slipped the card into my purse. "I will." That afternoon, my father showed up outside my apartment. He stood beside the SUV with his hands in his pockets. When I walked toward the building, he stepped in front of me. "We need to settle this." "I agree." "Good, then sign the transfer papers when they're ready." "I haven't seen any transfer papers." "You will." "And if I don't sign?" His expression hardened. "Don't be difficult." I met his eyes. "I'm not being difficult. I'm protecting myself." His voice became sharper. "This was always Ethan's vehicle." "No," I replied evenly. "It was always my loan." He looked away for the first time. "It was just easier this way." "Easier for who?" He didn't answer. Later that evening, Ethan called. I need to see those papers. You can. He came over without arguing. We sat at my kitchen table while he slowly turned each page. His confidence faded with every document. Finally, he looked up. I thought Mom and Dad bought it. So did I. I didn't know my application was denied. They never told you. He shook his head. They just said everything had worked out. We sat in silence. After several minutes, Ethan quietly pushed the folder back toward me. They expected you to hand me the keys. Yes. And they expected you to make the payments if something went wrong. I nodded. His shoulders slumped. This isn't what they told me. For the first time in years, this wasn't brother against sister. It was two adults realizing they'd both been manipulated in different ways. The following morning, I met with an attorney. He reviewed every document without interrupting. When he finished, he closed the folder carefully. So I asked. He leaned back in his chair. Your parents cannot transfer ownership of that SUV without your consent. I felt a small weight lift from my chest. I've already told them I won't sign anything until every financial responsibility is addressed honestly. He nodded approvingly. That's the correct decision. At that moment my phone buzzed again. It was another call from my father. I silenced it. The attorney folded his hands, looked directly at me and said quietly, "There's something your parents probably hoped you'd never discover." The attorney let the silence hang for a moment before opening the financing file again. He turned it toward me and tapped a page I hadn't paid much attention to. Your father wasn't simply trying to help your brother get a vehicle, he said. He built the entire purchase around your financial profile. I frowned. What do you mean? Your credit score qualified for a significantly lower interest rate. Your income satisfied the lender's requirements. Your insurance history reduced the premium. Without you, this deal likely wouldn't have been approved under these terms. I looked down at the paperwork again. Every advantage came back to me. He expected me to transfer everything later. The attorney nodded. Exactly. He paused before continuing. But here's the important part. He slid the loan agreement closer. Emotional expectations don't override legal ownership. I let out a slow breath. So his entire plan depended on me feeling too guilty to say no. I'm afraid that's exactly what it looks like. For years, I'd believed my parents overlooked me because Ethan needed more help. Sitting in that office, I realized something much harder to accept. They hadn't overlooked me. They had relied on me. My willingness to sacrifice had become part of their financial planning. I drove home with the SUV that afternoon. Not because I felt victorious. Because I finally understood the truth. The $5 mug hadn't been a random insult. It had been the perfect distraction. While everyone laughed, took photos, and celebrated Ethan's gift, nobody expected me to look inside the glove compartment. Nobody expected me to read the paperwork. Nobody expected me to leave. My father had counted on one thing: that I would smile, hand Ethan the keys after the party, and continue doing what I'd always done. Make everyone else's life easier. 2 days later, my parents asked to meet. This time I chose the location. A quiet conference room at my attorney's office. Richard arrived looking confident. Diane looked exhausted. Ethan came too, taking a seat beside me instead of beside our parents. Dad noticed immediately. "What are you doing over there?" he asked Ethan. "I'm listening." Dad turned to me. "So let's stop this nonsense." My attorney calmly placed the ownership documents on the table. "Mr. Carter," he said, "your daughter is the legal owner of the vehicle and the sole borrower under the financing agreement." Dad waved a dismissive hand. "She knows it belongs to Ethan." "No," I replied. "I know I'm responsible for $72,000. He leaned forward. "We were going to transfer everything. When, after the party, after I accepted the loan, you weren't supposed to make a scene. I couldn't help noticing his choice of words. Not you weren't supposed to be hurt. Not I'm sorry. Only, you weren't supposed to make a scene. The attorney spoke before I could. There is no evidence that Ms. Carter consented to acting as a nominee borrower. Dad's face reddened. I didn't think she'd react like this. No, I said quietly. You thought I'd react like I always have. The room fell silent. Even my mother couldn't argue. She lowered her eyes to the table. Ethan finally broke the silence. I have to ask you something. He looked directly at our parents. When my financing was denied, why didn't you tell me? Neither of them answered. He tried again. You let me believe you bought me a car. Dad rubbed his forehead. We were trying to make your birthday special. No, Ethan replied. You were trying to make Nellie pay for it. The words landed harder than anything I'd said. For the first time, my brother wasn't defending them. He was seeing them clearly. He turned toward me. I'm sorry. You didn't know. I should have asked questions. So should I. He gave a small, sad laugh. I guess we both trusted them. With my attorney's guidance, I made the decision that felt right. I would not transfer ownership. Instead, I arranged to sell the SUV through the proper legal process. The proceeds went towards satisfying the outstanding loan in my name, leaving me free of the financial obligation my father had created. The dealership confirmed that no ownership change could occur without my written authorization. The bank updated every account detail to communicate directly with me and no one else. For the first time since the purchase, everything reflected reality. News travels quickly through families, especially after secrets come out. My uncle called first. Nellie, I owe you an apology. So do I, my aunt admitted later. We believed what your parents told us. One by one, relatives who had accused me of stealing Ethan's birthday gift admitted they had judged me without knowing the facts. The birthday photos my mother had proudly posted online suddenly attracted different comments. People started asking why the registered owner wasn't the person standing beside the SUV. The congratulations stopped. The uncomfortable questions began. Eventually, my mother deleted the entire album. Things changed inside our family after that. Not overnight. Not perfectly. But permanently. My parents could no longer ask me to co-sign loans, cover emergencies, or quietly fix problems created by someone else's decisions. When they called asking for financial help a few months later, I answered politely. I'm not able to do that. There was no argument. No explanation. No guilt. Just a boundary. It felt unfamiliar. And incredibly peaceful. Ethan and I slowly rebuilt our relationship. Without our parents speaking for either of us, we discovered something surprising. We had both spent years playing roles we hadn't chosen. He had been treated like someone who could never stand on his own. I had been treated like someone who would always carry everyone else. Neither role was healthy. Neither was love. Over time, we began having real conversations instead of competing for approval that was never equally given. Months later, I stood in my apartment kitchen making coffee before work. The same cheap birthday mug sat on a shelf above the counter. I never used it. I kept it because it reminded me of the exact moment my life changed. Not when my parents embarrassed me. Not when they demanded the SUV back. But when I finally stopped believing I had to earn love by sacrificing myself. I glanced out the window at the parking space below. There was no luxury SUV anymore. Just the dependable sedan I'd purchased myself after the loan was resolved. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't $72,000. But every payment, every signature, and every decision belonged to me. For the first time in my life, so did my future. That birthday wasn't the day my parents gave my brother a $72,000 SUV. It was the day they accidentally gave me my freedom.